Asbestos is deadly. These men are removing asbestos from flats in Lambeth. The dangers of asbestos have been known for a very long time. How long? Well, the asbestos companies have been lying since 1898. This is a copy of a factory inspector's report warning of the dangers of asbestos in 1898. In 1920, a doctor noted that a British company, Cape Asbestos in South Africa, used young children to process raw asbestos by hand. By the age of 12, these child workers had asbestosis and heart failure. As it happens, in 1983, the ILEA Labour Group invited the same company, Cape Asbestos, to remove asbestos from Hackney schools. Asbestos Cement Primary School, India. In the 1930s, a largely British asbestos company set up business in India to avoid British safety regulations. They built this school a few yards from the asbestos factory. This is an asbestos dump near the school. James Cutler researched the film Alice, where all this information comes from.
I mean, asbestos isn't a remote threat. It's not something locked away behind factory gates. It affects me, for example. I live in Hackney. My daughter's growing up in Hackney. She's going to go to school in Hackney. She already goes to a Hackney nursery school. I mean, has that got asbestos in?
What school is it?
Graysbrook.
Yeah.
I mean, they are. So I'm directly involved. Also here in Hackney, we've got the London Chest Hospital. There are wards full of people from East London who work with asbestos and are now paying the price. There's the St Joseph Hospice, but for the terminally ill. They have, you know, every few weeks they have 2 or 3 asbestos cancer cases who go there to die. So East London's particular, it's a centre, it's a black spot on the cancer atlas of Britain for asbestos disease. It lights up on the map because large asbestos companies had factories here. And some of the people dying they're not the workers, they're people that just live nearby.
We are told there's not enough money to remove asbestos from Hackney schools. But Hackney has a tradition of trying to defend its schools against the people who keep on saying there isn't enough money for the children of Hackney. Teachers, school workers, parents and children have for the past 10 to 15 years been campaigning with marches, petitions, demonstrations, and even occupations. For a long time, loss of jobs was the most important issue, and obviously it still is. But around 1980, we began to take the whole issue of health and safety more seriously. At that time, we were not told just how much asbestos there is in Hackney schools. It was the run-down state of the old school buildings that concerned us.
Children at one school in North London were given extra time off today after crumbling brickwork fell into the playground. Education officials had hoped to reopen the school, but they decided more safety work was needed and sent the pupils home.
The William Patton School in Stoke Newington was hurriedly closed when bits of the century-old building began falling off. Chunks of masonry and brickwork crashed from the parapet to the playground 50 feet below. Luckily, it was deserted.
If you look at the size of this brick, which split in 2, and realise that this came down from a height of about 4 stories, this could have killed a child. We're very lucky, actually, that nobody was killed.
Exceptional snow and ice accelerated the decline of the once proud building. Danger zones have been fenced off, scaffolding and boarding erected to at least make the doorways safe. But it wasn't safe enough for officials to reopen the building today, and it wasn't possible to tell children and parents.
It's very disruptive for the kids. I mean, they've just come back from Christmas holidays and they're back for a couple of weeks and then off again.
Well, I think that basically the problem is that a lot of money hasn't been put in the maintenance of the school.
I don't know how long it's going to take for the work to be done. The scaffolding that's up is actually inadequate. And, I mean, how long is it actually going to be before our kids, you know, are going to get back into their school and be able to get some kind of education?
Emergency repairs are costing £2,000. Permanent repairs are likely to cost £30,000. unlikely to start for 3 months, and only then if the Education Authority's maintenance budget survives the next round of spending cuts.
What we really need to look at is whether we can afford, in these sort of circumstances, with this sort of thing happening, to cut our budget on maintenance, which is what we're being required to do and what we would have to do if we complied with the government's guidelines.
It's not the only old school in London. How many more are like this?
Oh, we've got hundreds. We've got over 1,000 schools, and many of those are very old schools. And the problem is that always in the past, whenever there are reductions to be made in budgets, it's the planned maintenance that suffers.
But at Stoke Newington, teachers and pupils will have to put up with almost siege conditions. David Bellin for Thames News.
In the event, the ILEA did what the government told it to do. It cut the money badly needed for Hackney's old school buildings. Mike Mulvaney, then head teacher of Gayhurst Infants.
This is the building that was perfectly safe. Parts of it fell off a few months back, and we were told by Ilya architects that there was nothing wrong with it. A series of architects came round and looked at it through their binoculars, didn't have the nuance to actually go up the ladder and have a look at it. But we were told by them that it's perfectly safe, there was no danger to the children whatsoever. As a result of threatening to close the school, they had a closer look. They came round and knocked down loose pieces. And since they put this scaffold up, they found there was a positive danger of children being killed in this playground as a result of pieces falling off. For example, that stone pinnacle just up near the top of the building, there was one on the other side of the building which was actually hanging off. There was nothing supporting it, there was no mortar there, the old joints had broken away, and it came off in one of the workmen's hands as he tried to pull himself up. It was lucky he didn't fall off with it. Well, the architect said to me today that he wouldn't like to think that children were actually using this fire escape.
Oh, did he? That's interesting. So they've actually changed the position of it.
Yeah. What's happened is that this is filled up with water, and at some time it's frozen. And as it's frozen, it's cracked open. So at the moment, it's still probably full up with water. So they can't actually decide at the moment whether they're going to band this in some way to hold it together, or whether they're going to put new holes in where it has cracked.
If the architect said that he wouldn't like the children to use this fire escape, how will they escape if there's a fire?
Down the one staircase that exists inside the school. There is one escape route.
And what if the fire's on that staircase?
They jump off the roof.
Like the rubber bricks.
Meanwhile, at William Patton Infant School, the toilets were in a disgusting state. Ruth Cadby, a parent at the school.
And our children were coming home with dirty pants or coming home saying they couldn't go to the lavatory because they couldn't wash their hands, there was no lavatory paper, and anyway it was across the other side of the playground. And we became more and more concerned, and of course we have a PTA. Only the infant school at that time had a PTA. And the issues were brought up again and again, and the health and safety rep became very angry about it because he saw how distressed many of the children were by these simple things. But my child, for example, didn't want to go to school because he couldn't go to the lavatory.
Well, it got to the situation after a while that it was a bit like the tourist board here. You had everybody from the ILEA was coming to visit the school, and everyone was sort of wandering around and saying, well, this is really very serious, yes, I mean, this is really, I can see what you mean, it's a very serious situation. And then they go away again, and that was it. And then you'd wait, and then someone else would come along and say, well, yes, I see what you mean, and so on and so forth, and go away again. And there was one chap who came down, and I showed him the place where the rats were actually coming up through the toilets. They'd become an open drain. And he said, oh, that's all right, just get the school keeper to sort of flush some water down every now and then.
We wrote many pleas to our county hall, all of which were deflected and diffused. No, there was no money, and why should our school have preferential treatment when all the schools in Hackney were like this, and there was a lot of emotional blackmail involved.
And we were saying that there's no hot and cold water. There's the children are actually refusing to go to the toilet. And they're actually doing it in their trousers rather than go to the toilet. And she said, well, I've seen worse. At least it's got a roof.
And it in fact culminated in, after many attempts to get the money we actually got an independent architect to design lavatories, which they said couldn't be attached to the school. We actually got somebody to draw up the plans, and he did it very cheaply for us and showed how indeed it could be done. But nothing worked. So finally, 3 coachloads of parents and children went to County Hall on the day of the Finance Committee meeting, and we were greeted by fairly startled officials.
They refused to see us. We went out the door and we shout, and they also came out, but they didn't want to see us at all because they knew what was going on in the school at that particular moment. But after all, we went upstairs and we was let in on the gallery, and they were all sitting down there doing their own business and not paying attention to what we were actually saying about the school and about the condition of the toilets which the children were using. We were shouted, and I didn't remember quite well. I think Brian knew what the lady was. She ran out and went straight into the what you call it there? Yes. Yeah. And she locked herself away because she knew what was taking place. She was ashamed of herself to know that children be coming to a school using toilets like this. Not even an animal outside would use toilets like these, and we didn't put up to it at all.
So what did you get out of them in the end?
Well, we get a new toilet. We fight, and we did get a new toilet for the children, and that's what we wanted.
The occupation of County Hall by teachers, parents and children didn't make the 6 o'clock news, but it won the battle for new toilets and opened the eyes of teachers across the borough to all matters of health and safety. 1982-83, Hackney NUT health and safety reps found that there was asbestos in all Hackney schools, and that the ILEA and NUT had known about it for some time. Hackney Downs School.
A few years ago, we discovered that there was asbestos in the walls here, and the authority came along and said, well, that's no problem, we'll deal with it. They didn't tell us exactly what they did, and at that time, I don't think we were that health and safety conscious, but what they did was to put some thin plywood in front of it, 1/8 of an inch, which is not thick enough really, and they screwed it through, and presumably in screwing it through actually went through the asbestos. And behind it is asbestos sheeting. It's still here now. These have been condemned since we found out the condition it was in, and they're due to be stripped out this summer, and that includes the ceilings, which are just actually asbestos sheeting, which has just been painted over, and in fact it's only been painted over recently. It was bare asbestos before that. Now, kids in this room, right, this was a classroom, and then last year it was a 6th form common room, tend to, a big room like this, they're bound to kick a ball around or something, and these panels get cracked. Here, somebody probably stuck an umbrella through it or something. Like, you can put your hand in behind it, and if there's asbestos here, and when I did a check here, there's a bit there, just come out of that. That's the sort of material we're talking about. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, if it's in this form, it's not dangerous. Not friable, but it's the dust that's inhaled that causes cancer. Now, as I'm holding this here, I'm at risk because bits are falling off it all the time. And therefore, for anybody to say that isn't dangerous, they need their head examined. Now, for years, the authority said as long as you put this plywood in front of it, it's safe. And we've basically established the argument now that it's not safe in a school building.
Well, the whole of this cupboard inside was full of asbestos. There was asbestos panelling on all sides. And children's clothes were kept in here. There was asbestos which was roughly cut by an old schoolkeeper behind and underneath this fireplace, in this staff room and in the junior staff room. All of the panels and the doors throughout the whole school were made of asbestos. They've now been removed and superlux is used in their place. The whole of this partition was asbestos, especially the top half, and it went round the corner there. We don't know why it was here. It was just partition between the classroom and the office.
The asbestos has now been removed from William Patton. Where might people expect to find asbestos in their schools?
Walls, in the cement used in the bricks, corridors, doorways, staff rooms, in fact, all over the building.
Well, asbestos it's a mineral that's mined from the earth, and it goes into, it's estimated 3,000 products, which means it's everywhere, from our ironing boards at home to panelling, to floor tiles, to ceiling tiles, etc. Unfortunately, you can't tell the difference between asbestos and many other products, so you actually need analytical reports, laboratory report to tell you, and that's the first thing. You can't trust your eyes. You have to have an analyst report.
And people talk about blue, white, brown. What are these, and is one more dangerous than the other?
Well, when freshly mined, they are these different colours, it's true, and there is some evidence that blue is worse than brown and brown is worse than white. But white causes, which is the most common, it causes cancer, it causes lung scarring, it causes all the other diseases, and neither Sweden nor America distinguish between any of these forms. And most responsible authorities are saying that they're all the same, treat them all the same. Since 1960, they've found that it's not just asbestos workers who are dying of asbestos-related cancers and lung scarring, but it's people who've lived within a quarter of a mile of an asbestos factory who were washing the overalls. For example, there's a very good example of a man who now goes around South London, tenants associations and other associations, wherever asbestos is, because 6 months ago his wife died of washing his overalls 20 years ago, and he only worked asbestos for a year. And it's a tremendously powerful indictment of asbestos that just washing someone's overalls, you die and they live. And I think this is it. There is no safe level. And it's those sort of levels of exposure that are very, very frightening to people. And children in particular are especially at risk because they live longer and because as grown organisms, they're more susceptible to agents known to cause cancer.
We had some workmen come into one of the classrooms to do some painting, I believe. And it was an electrical cupboard. The classroom teacher asked the workmen, what they were doing, or something to that effect. And they said, just checking to make sure that everything's okay. But because we knew that some schools had had cases of asbestos, and the staff that was on the door was a bit suspicious. In the meantime, one of the members at the meeting said, the schoolkeeper said he suspects there's some asbestos in the boiler house. But so before in fact the meeting could be over, Mike and myself, that's the headmaster and myself, just went down quickly to the boiler house to look at it, and we found some flakings on the pipe hangings. And we decided that looked close enough to asbestos. We are not experts, but precaution is better than cure.
So then I rang the engineer and said, I think there's damaged asbestos in the boiler house. And he said, no, it's not asbestos.
All the asbestos was taken out?
All the asbestos was taken out, that's right, in 1977. And all that's left there is magnesite and calcite. And I've got a report in front of me that actually says that. So I said, well, would you send me a copy of the report? He said, no, I can't do that. You're not entitled to it. Despite trying to twist his arm, he wouldn't send the report, so requested a survey of the lagging that's in the boiler house. And that actually showed that there was asbestos there, so either the guy was lying or the report that he had was inaccurate. I never saw the report, so I'm not actually prepared to believe it existed.
A school association meeting was called, which I attended with my daughter. During the meeting, it became obvious to me that nobody could guarantee that the school was a safe place for Kira to be in. And so I stood up at the meeting and said that until the asbestos was cleared from the school and until 2 independent experts could assure me that the school was a safe place for my daughter to be in, that I would keep her away from school.
So we sent letters home to parents saying that the school would be closed from the following Monday. And then the following Monday, when we got to school, there were divisional officers here, there were people from engineering department, there was people from the health and safety executive, people from the medical department at County Hall. In fact, there was a huge gathering of officers.
In the school, which we'd all refused to come into because of the asbestos.
Who were basically there to convince us that the school was absolutely safe.
The authorities, on the one hand, seem very keen to reassure us that the school is safe, and on the other hand, seem very reluctant to do anything about repairing the school, whether it's regards to removing the asbestos or to coping with falling masonry. At the school association meeting I went to, which was primarily to talk about asbestos, the falling masonry was mentioned. Mr. Groves, the divisional officer, was there, and he was asked if a coach could be provided to take children away for the day, a classroom of children away, because the work involved would disturb the children so much, and windows being taken out, and there was a lot of noise. And Mr. Grove simply turned around and said, well, I don't know, you're making an awful lot of fuss about nothing. He said, after all, it's no different to having your bedroom decorated, is it?
The other thing that they were saying was that although there was asbestos there wasn't any danger, and that they were going to do air tests which would prove to all of us that there was no danger, and that the results of the air tests would show that it was within the acceptable ILEA measures of asbestos, and therefore it would be safe. The point was that we weren't prepared to accept that, because we felt very strongly that if there's any asbestos and any asbestos dust, then it isn't safe. That asbestos is not safe, and there is no level of safety. So we were fortunate enough to have quite a bit of knowledge about the sorts of air tests that they wanted to use, and we knew the numbers of fibres that they actually measured, and that an electron microscope is the only real way to test for safety of asbestos. And on the basis of that, we were having a discussion with the authorities, and they then realised that we actually knew quite a lot about it.
Loony Moments number 1.
Yeah, so we met in the half term to see how the situation was going, and the ILEA had done some air monitoring, some air test monitoring. And I asked him whether it made sense to do an air test at a height of 4 feet when the dust by then had settled on the floor, so the asbestos was actually on the ground level. And this is the chief health and safety officer for the ILEA. Said, oh, it's all right, because we sent the cleaners in to sweep it all up first.
Another interesting thing that happened at the time was that they were saying it's perfectly safe to send children into the school. No hazard whatsoever. And at the same time as this was happening, the boilers broke down and wouldn't function. And when we asked when they were going to be repaired, we were told by the engineering department, well, we can't send any workers into the school, there's asbestos there.
There it all was flaking, and despite their regular health and safety checks, they may well have noticed it, but they certainly didn't inform anybody, and they'd obviously, it had been a cover-up job.
One of the things that they said initially, although they changed their tune in the course of the week, that it's only white asbestos, and that's nothing like as dangerous as blue asbestos. Although by the end of the week, they were actually admitting that all forms of asbestos were in fact dangerous, blue, white or brown. We said that we wouldn't go back to work, in fact, until we had the guarantee that the asbestos would be removed. And we didn't have that guarantee until the very end of the week. So it was 5 days before they relented over actual removal.
I really believe if the children are affected in any way because of some carelessness or insufficient goodwill of the teachers in the way of communication, then I think the adults who are working with children have no right to be there.
I think the asbestos industry should be made responsible for the damage
and accountable for everything.
They should be accountable, yes.
That's happened. I mean, we could say that perhaps they didn't know at the beginning, but then now they do know about it.
Yes, nobody let that complete ignorance anymore.
No.
Hello, my name's Dr. Smarty Pants, and I know everything. Yeah, I know all there is to know. So today, I want to talk to you about asbestos. Now then, you may hear some people saying to you that asbestos is dangerous. You may hear that your children are in danger if they're exposed to asbestos. Well, this is nonsense. It's been shown again and again that it takes at least 20 years for the effects of breathing in asbestos to show. 20 years. Well, after 20 years, your children won't be children anymore, will they? Yeah, there we are. So anyone who says to me, asbestos in schools is unsafe for our children, I say, show me the child killed by asbestos. Huh? Adults, well, loads of them. But children, none. So always remember, your children are not dying from asbestos. All they're doing is breathing it in. Well, that's all from me. Bye.
Rushmore Infant School, Hackney. Asbestos was found here too. Anne Lynott.
When the guys came down to remove the asbestos, they were only glaziers. They weren't proper asbestos removal people. They were bloody TMW Moore brothers who were glaziers. 2 of them were 18 to 19-year-old boys, and another bloody cowboy who was their foreman. They wouldn't speak to me. They were told not to talk to me. And I said, well, look, do you realise what you're doing? He says, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. I said, well, do you realise how dangerous that stuff is? He says, I'm sorry. He says, I'm not allowed to talk to you. All right, fair enough. Then the foreman came in. I said, excuse me. I said, do you realise what you're doing? He said, shut up. He said, this is my job. I'm doing what I'm told to do. Okay, I'm getting paid for it. I said, oh, fair enough, fine. So I said, well, look, where are you taking this stuff? Where are you dumping it? I didn't think it. No reply to that. They just dumped it in plastic bags, threw it in the back of their van, and off they went. Plus the fact as well, when I went into the school, when that asbestos was being removed, I wore proper clothing, protective clothing, and a mask, and rubber gloves, and proper boots. And these people had no protective clothing at all. And, you know, I mean, it was just diabolical how the whole thing was carried out. We fought for alternative accommodation while all this was going on. We got that within about 2 to 3 days. So, I mean, can I just say at that stage as well, don't be put off by the council if they say that they can't give alternative accommodation, because they can give alternative accommodation. And if they're going to do that, make sure that the schools that they offer you have got no asbestos there. We actually formed an action committee, but we did actually have the support of NUT teachers, which was really good. I mean, they stuck with us all the way. But it was mostly parents. I, as a parent, stood up and said that we feel that we would like our children removed from the school until the asbestos was removed. If you've got a parent or parents who do feel strongly enough, if there's any risk to the child's health or to themselves, then I would say, for Christ's sake, stand up and fight for your bloody rights. Stand up and say, right, we've been shoved around long enough. We're not going to be shoved around anymore, because as parents, we have got the right to say whatever we want to. As an individual parent, to do what I did was to actually say to those parents that your child's health is in danger. Let's do something about it. Where do you go from here? You form yourself into either an action committee, a group. You get somebody who can do leaflets for you. You get leaflets out. You get your publicity from your newspapers. Well, you have a meeting. You discuss what the general feeling is amongst people. You might come up against parents who are going to disagree with what you're doing, what you're saying. You're going to get parents who are with you. And the only way I can think to answer that question really is that even if you stand on your own as an individual and you haven't got your support, then you must carry on with what you believe in. I mean, you've got to do that, because if you don't believe in yourself, who else is? Oh. When and if you do form your group, or if it is just you as an individual person who's taking this matter up, it's very important to find out who your contacts are within your local council or local authority. Yeah. And please don't feel intimidated by those people, because they're just men in suits with white shirts and ties who carry briefcases. So don't let them put you off at all. You stand up and you bloody fight them all the way. All right, that's right. Okay.
Arati Chakraborty is the NUT Health and Safety Rep at Rushmore.
And we all NUT teachers stood outside the school building because the work has not been done the time we have given them. And some of the parents joined with us, and Hackney NUT chair and secretary, Mr. Rice, he also came to support us. And after that, on Monday the 25th of April, the school was closed, and they started working on removing the asbestos.
So because you took that action, you succeeded in making the authority do what they didn't intend to do?
Yeah. Authorities intended to do in 2 stages. We have to agree the 2 stages because we thought we are not all that powerful unless we get backing from somewhere else. So we got a backing from parents. So it was quite good for us to get parental backing. With parental backing and parental help, we succeeded to remove the asbestos from the school.
Lonely Moments number 2.
It was a very big parents' meeting, and some of the parents were worried that the asbestos would actually be falling into the food, because right near where the children were eating, there's this blue asbestos ceiling that was flaking. And this medical advisor for the ILA stood up and said, there is no evidence to show that eating asbestos is harmful.
Meanwhile, at Gainsborough School,
we were descended upon by a group of men. Nobody knew why they were there or who they were. And it's not until sort of later in the day that we were actually informed as to who they were and why they were there. Apparently, we were told that asbestos had been found and they were there to investigate and see, what would happen about it.
You were told it was all under control, though, weren't you? Or led to
something
believe
like that,
yeah. And then later on that day, because I'd been at Q's all day, I was phoned in the evening. And I took it rather seriously, as did quite a lot of people. And it was then half term, and nothing had been sort of done, nothing was settled. And so I spent half term phoning up Department of the Environment and everybody I could think of to find independent information. And I learnt over half term that asbestos was absolutely lethal. And this hadn't been made apparent to any of us, had it really? It was sort of, it's perfectly okay, it's under control, don't worry, the authority will handle it. And the more I learnt, the more frightened I got. And then really we came back after we'd sort of done all we could over half term, and Richard had been very active on our behalf and sort of rushed around everywhere talking to people. We came back in on the Monday and Mr. Groves was there, and we met in the medical room here. And enormous pressure was put on us to go back into that school, even though they were saying asbestos is there. They were saying it's okay, nothing to panic about, don't get hysterical, don't get emotional, everything's going to be all right. The kids were all in the playground, and there were a lot of us who were really unhappy with that and said, no, we're sorry, we're not prepared to go back in. We think the onus is on the authority to prove to us that the place is safe.
People's attitudes seem to change, as though
as if
we were the cause.
That's
right, as though we were the cause of all ills,
You were made to feel as if you were blamed for it.
Well, I felt so, yes. I mean, nothing was actually said, it's just people's attitudes, had changed. Formerly they were friendly, and, some of them showed you sort of quite grim faces, and they actually had to speak to you.
Everything you know now, right, and you're now about to be in a new school, and suddenly you hear about asbestos. How would you behave would you behave in any different way at all?
I don't think what I would do would change, but I think the way I did it might change. I mean, we were all very frightened, and we were all very sort of concerned all the time that perhaps we were being silly. This was put to us so often, that we were being silly, we were being hysterical, we were just a lot of silly women. And I think now I would have much more confidence in just saying, no, I'm not having this, it's not on, you're messing about with our health. And I think I'd be much stronger, and I'd demand much more consultation. I would want to involve the parents, I think. That's right. And bring them in and let them know right from the start, because I think there's been a lot of ill feeling because they haven't understood. And our hands have been tied because we haven't had a parents' meeting. You're limited in what you can then say to the parents without being accused of being subversive.
Hello again. Well, I've got some facts for you this time. Now, did you know that our MPs and peers started believing all these lies about asbestos? So they went to the wild expense of having every single little bit of asbestos, blue, white, brown, pink, all of it removed from the Houses of Parliament. Now, it's that kind of thing that gives asbestos a bad name. I mean, people might go around saying things like, what's bad enough for them is bad enough for us. Ridiculous. Well, and did you know also that as long ago as 1918, the life insurance people in the USA were taken in by these lies, and they stopped giving life insurance to people who worked in asbestos factories. The asbestos workers were, they said, a dead loss.
Burbage Infant School.
We found lots of asbestos everywhere, like in all the corridors, on the doors, and we've got a parents' room and it had a huge panel of asbestos. I don't know how long it is, about 8 foot long by 4 foot, and it wasn't actually broken, but it wasn't painted, it wasn't sealed, and it looked a terrible mess. Anyway, we did the survey and we handed in our report, and then they.
And when we did the survey, we found the whole nursery was practically built with asbestos.
Yes, all the walls and ceilings are cladded with asbestos. And we had a site meeting in the hut, And we had all these people from earlier down, and they said, well, nothing we can do about this, we can't remove it. It's perfectly safe as long as you don't jump up and down. Perhaps I should go back. When we first found the asbestos in the nursery, we obviously removed all the kids and we sited them into school. And they're still there, actually. We had the site meeting with all the people from earlier, and they said, well, there's nothing we can do as long as it's not badly damaged. It's, when we'll repair the damaged bits, but we can't remove it. We'll paint it for you. And we said, no, we didn't want that. And then they said they would clad it, do a little bit of overlaying of it.
Yeah,
4 foot 6 height.
4 foot 6 height.
All the way round.
Supposedly child height.
Yeah. And so they went on offering us all these things that we didn't really want, so we turned it all down. And then they said they'd do an air test, so they did this air test with oscillating fans and pumps. And of course they came up with like very low results in their tests. And they sent another letter saying, well, there's nothing we can do except paint it, encapsulate it and clad it over. They offered us so many different things over the period, it's really difficult to remember. They were even going to, at one point, cover the ceiling, weren't they?
That's right.
In the hut, weren't they, with plywood? Like cover the asbestos, cover the walls.
And at one stage they said if they put notices up by the lights and things, then that would be good enough for the workmen.
Finally, the ILEA gave in and the workmen came.
And when I said they couldn't come at school time, I went on to say you will come properly prepared and seal off the room correctly, and you'll wear the masks, etc. Take all the proper safety precautions. And they said to me, yes, of course we will. And then this whole complete mess happened. You can carry on from there.
This guy turned up with bits of plastic sheeting, and he sort of covered the door, he covered the back of the wall, he put these overalls on, he had a mask, he put it on and he went in there, and I thought, well, this looks all right. So I went upstairs in the staff room and I heard this crashing, banging, thumping, and I thought, hello, he's breaking the asbestos up. You're not supposed to do that. It flakes and the fibres are released and it's dangerous, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And he was actually ripping it off the wall with a hammer and breaking it over his knee. I saw him do it, so I knocked on the door, took his mask off, came out with dust everywhere. I said, that's like really dangerous what you're doing. What are you doing? He said, I know what I'm doing. What are you fussing about? I'm taking this asbestos down. I said, well, we want to remove properly. It is being removed properly, and he got a bit stroppy, and at one point I thought he was going to punch me once, so I left it at that, and I said, well, look, we'll have to get in touch with the authorities. He said, you're not doing this properly. So we phoned the head, who phoned, she was at home at the time, she phoned Ilya, and they phoned the contractor, and the contractor came down and talked to his man, told him to sort of calm it down and be a bit more careful. But by this time the guy was really angry, sort of thrown his mask off, and he was in there knocking it about even more, and it was just... And then he wanted to come and use the phone upstairs in the office, and he had asbestos on his, dust on his shoes, and he was trampling it up the stairs, and it was everywhere. We just thought, this is awful, we didn't know what to do. We didn't want to go too near him. We couldn't sort of throw him out. It was really, really terrible. There was absolutely no supervision at all. There was nobody here to keep an eye on the contractor. There was no monitoring. There's no monitoring process at all, as far as I can see. There wasn't then. I don't know if there is any now. This guy came along on his own with his hammer and his boiler suit, and went in there and was just actually allowed to do what he liked.
Loony Moments number 10.
At Clapton, this girl just went up to the teacher and said, "Excuse me, miss, do you know they're drilling asbestos over there?" She said, "No." Like, no one knew. The teachers didn't know, the head didn't know, no one knew.
By the time Orchard School discovered asbestos, the teachers were well prepared to tackle the ILEA.
We actually drew up a lot of points which we thought were very relevant to the safety of the way they were actually going to carry out the work in our school.
Okay, can I say to you, why did you bother to do that? Why wouldn't you trust the way they do it?
Well, we'd had work done previously at half-term when they'd removed panelling in the school, and they actually kept us in the dark for a long time on how they were going to do the work, what sort of testing they were going to carry out, and it took them a long time to actually sort of release the results of those tests. And the work was done, as I say, in the half-term, and children came back to school on the Monday, and there was no notification given to parents about that asbestos work had been carried out in the school, and we were very concerned that kids may have been going into an asbestos-contaminated environment.
And indeed was still being carried out. It wasn't finished until the Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right, perhaps you'd like to read out some of those kinds of demands that you put on the authority then?
Well, a major demand that we made, which they haven't agreed to, was that we would love to have seen the contract drawn up between the authority and the contractor. We thought that would be quite relevant in that it would specify a lot of the safety procedures that the contractor should actually follow. They refused to give us that, but they referred us to sort of lots of safety documents, which obviously we're in the process of buying and reading up on really quickly. We were quite concerned, well, very, very concerned in actual fact, that the work should be done very safely. And we felt that this was a big issue, that not only should all the asbestos that was taken out of the school be in double sealed bags, be clearly labelled, taken away every day, etc., but also that the people that were actually doing the work were themselves aware that they should actually take very safe precautions, etc., be properly dressed, have the right air filters working, etc., etc. And that the school itself would be thoroughly tested, cleaned and tested, and the results would be notified to us 7 days at least before the children were due to come back, so that we would have a 7-day stopgap to actually inform parents that the school would remain closed.
Right, now were you told at any point whether the ILEA would in fact monitor what was going on?
We actually asked who was going to supervise the work from County Hall, and were told nobody, because they won't actually supervise asbestos removal work. They will actually check at the beginning and at the end, but they won't actually supervise the work itself, because they say it's dangerous for themselves to supervise. So we've actually sort of drawn up contingency plans that there'll be quite a few members of staff around the school while the work is going on to make sure that they're actually carrying out the safety precautions they said they will carry out.
I see. And how did they receive these demands that you made?
Well, they were very, very concerned, I think, because the initial meeting they had with us, they steamrolled us because we knew nothing about asbestos withdrawal, etc., etc. And they just sort of came out with a lot of technical jargon, and we didn't have a clue what they were talking about. And we agreed to a lot of things which, in fact, we wouldn't have agreed to now. I mean, we learned a lot from our first experience, and now, because we had these points written down, and they knew that they were going to come into a school which was very concerned about asbestos, they answered every single point specifically. And I mean, it's quite surprising when you go there. You think you get one guy from County Hall come along, and you actually get, I think there were 6 people from County Hall and the contractor there to answer individual questions about individual parts of the safety precautions, etc.
So in the long run, you're satisfied now, having made those demands. You're satisfied with?
Well, we won't be satisfied until the work's thoroughly done really properly, and we've actually said that we're not prepared to work in the school until we're actually sure that the school is safe after the removal. I think to get rid of asbestos is really good. It should be a priority, but to get rid of it safely as well is a real concern for everybody.
After a couple of meetings, we decided that one of the things we really needed was some money in order to get more publicity, and our plan was to produce a good few thousand leaflets. And we were told by one of the councillors that we'd have absolutely no trouble getting this 600 quid grant just rubber stamped, because it was something they felt strongly about too. And then this week we discovered that we were not going to get any of the money because it's not really in keeping with what ILEA policy is.
Basically, they said it was anti-ILEA, so they wouldn't give us the money. And this is after a couple of councillors had been along to meetings and said, yeah, Hackney Council are really in favour of all asbestos being taken out of schools, and we fully support you. Because they actually sort of, I suppose, part and parcel of the same Labour group, they said it was anti-ILEA.
So we're now thinking, in fact, perhaps trying to the GLC.
Hello again. Now, some people ask me, well, who makes asbestos? Well, the names to remember are Turner and Newell. And they're not in prison, no, and you won't have heard the Sun asking for the restoration of the death penalty for people who make asbestos. No. However, some of you might like to talk to these people, Turner and Newell, remember? Well, please don't. They're very, very busy and very, very rich. Yes, and please don't send them abusive letters at this address. Turner and Newell, 29 Curzon Street, London West 1. Telephone number 01499 3231. Remember the name, Turner and Newell. Bye.
At William Patten, parents and teachers together decided that the parents would keep their children at home unless all asbestos was removed. This had to be done under the control of an NUT and Parents Working Party. Then blue asbestos was found in the corridor, minutes after the ILEA gave William Patton's school the all clear. The ILEA had broken the law because they had not informed anyone that blue asbestos was present, and they had not followed legal safety procedures. One day, teachers noticed this: asbestos exposed on the back of a lorry in the middle of the playground. Then the ILEA told William Patton that their asbestos-ridden hut could not be replaced. However, after parent-teacher pressure, they agreed to remove the hut, strip the asbestos, and bring the hut back on a lorry. In the event, they broke the hut, spreading asbestos all over the playground, and the hut fell off the lorry. Finally, William Patton School got their new hut, and all the demands of the Parent-Teacher Committee were met. Mr. Deacon, Daubeny Road, Hackney.
Anyway, they sent me downstairs, they laid me on the couch, face downwards. Some big contraption come round, big television camera it was or something, I couldn't see what it was, hell of a size it was. Swung it round over me, and it showed you my inside on the screen. And this man was marking me back from the screen where the shadow on my lung was. And when he got that, he said, "Now, Mr. Deacon," he said, "this won't hurt," he said, "you'll feel it go cold." Well, he froze it, and he put the needles in, and what I understand he did, he took pieces of the lung, tissues of the lung, and some fluid, and then through that, I had to wait. That was on the Friday. They let me home for the weekend, and on the Monday when I went back, the young doctor who works under Mr. Empney, he came around and said, "Well, Mr. Deacon, you've got a small growth," he says. When the doctor, Mr. Empney, when I first see him, he asked me all my past history, see? And I accidentally says to him, you know, "Well," I said, "I don't know if it helped you, doctor." I said, "But 40 years ago, I was a boiler cover working with asbestos."
And all this time when you were working asbestos, no one ever said asbestos was dangerous?
Not a word, no. I will tell you, I know I've heard of people having asbestosis, but I didn't know it was a killer. I didn't know it caused cancer, though. Well, you know, years ago when I was a boy, you never heard of cancer, did you? I don't know about you, but as I say, when I was young, when I started in the trade at 16, you never heard of cancer. But now that's all you hear of, isn't it? And then when I went to see my own doctor, Dr. Kapur at Clifton, he says to me, "When you go and see Dr. Empney, get him to get you a form and start the ball rolling to make a claim. Because it's easier said than done, that, isn't it? But I'd do it for other people's benefit, because I know it won't do me. They could give me £200,000. It won't do me no good, will it? Not now I've got it."
This child died of cancer caused by asbestos. Richard Reeser, Secretary of the Inner London Teachers Association.
If there was a natural disaster where perhaps 500,000 people were going to die, the government would intervene. Because it's sitting in the buildings and it's not seen quite as dangerously, people just ignore it. And we think it's just as dangerous, and therefore the government should put up the money for the removal. One of the other things we're looking at the moment is to actually force a situation where the people who are actually responsible for marketing this stuff and putting it in all our public buildings and our homes are actually made to pay for its removal, the asbestos manufacturers, because they knew bloody well when they were marketing this stuff that it was a lethal thing to be putting around.
Asbestos is just unnecessary. If one look at the historical aspect of asbestos in schools and so forth, I think one can draw the analogy with today's drug manufacturers, how they push drugs unnecessarily, and it does appear to me that this is what salesmen and manufacturers of asbestos in the past was doing, because to them it was rather cheap and they convinced people it was so necessary. I would say that if parents should be concerned, and they should organize themselves with concerned teachers, local councillors, and authorities of the education authorities, and press for it and don't give up, and just insist that it's removed, and wherever possible, independent observers should be called in when it's cleared out to ensure that it's really removed, and don't trust no authority's word that it has been removed. And this is the advice I would give to parents, but you must organize.
Brian Simons, NUT Health and Safety Rep.
The thing that hits you is that you're given a film, and this was an ILEA NUT Health and Safety course, which is basically, it's very funny, it's basically telling you that to be militant doesn't really work. And they have three characters playing health and safety reps, and you've got your sort of raving red loony who gets everybody's back up and says, well, you know, we must go on strike over this and all that, and he doesn't get the job done. And then you've got your sort of inefficient sort of dawdler who doesn't get the job done either. Because the person who really gets it done is the one who moves slowly, you know, the one who sort of takes it step by step and is very polite to everyone and so on. So it's actually, you've got a bit of propaganda there mixed in with your health and safety course.
Right, well, presumably you don't think the slowly method is going to get asbestos out of our schools.
No, it's not because the people at ILEA aren't well-meaning. I mean, I think probably Margaret Morgan really wants to get asbestos out of schools, but they're stuck.
Hello again. Well, now, plenty of you have heard of asbestos, but probably not many of you have seen it. Well, I've got some here, and you can see that it breaks quite easily. You can see the fibres, and you can see the way it crumbles. But what not many people know is what it tastes like. That's because people are afraid of asbestos. Now, this is ridiculous. Master your fear, go out and get some, buy it, steal it, break it off a school somewhere, and then take it home and eat it. Like this. I mean, you see, asbestos. Let me recommend it. It's all the little fibres getting them out. Oh, I just can't have enough of it. It's incredible stuff. Just see the little fibres down and get them in your mouth and breathe in. Oh, asbestos. I couldn't live without it.
Natasha Sivanandan, NUT Health and Safety Rep.
I don't think that the leaflets that the ILEA and the NUT have produced are doing any good at all, because we're right back to the first major problem, which is, does the ILEA take seriously its responsibility to kids? And if you take Brook House, my school for example, it's a perfect example. We come back after the summer holiday told that our building is going to be safe from asbestos, and is it? No, we have workmen working without taking proper precautions. We have people leaving windows open so dust carries, staff going in and carrying contaminated books from one building to another. People expected, pupils as well, to work on floors with work going on above them and below them. And what we really come back to is that the ILEA has cloaked the whole thing that it's doing in total secrecy, hasn't informed parents and pupils about the seriousness of the situation, hasn't explained to staff about what its responsibilities are and so on. And what we come back to is that the ILEA does not take seriously the lives and health and safety of its staff or its pupils, and that we're exposing 11 to 18-year-olds without their parents' knowledge to something that could seriously damage, if not kill them, in 15 to 20 years' time.
I would say there's no such thing as safe asbestos.
Essentially, if asbestos is there, it will release asbestos fibres. Studies have shown that there's no question about that. And if it's there, you want it removed.
Kids and asbestos don't go together.
If the school wasn't safe, then and they wasn't going to do the school, then I wouldn't send my child to the school.
पता है बड़ी मदद वरित करे कारण के एस्बेस्टोस स्कूलમાં હોય એટલે બચ્ચા માટે સેફ ના કહેવાય.
I think a campaign for the removal of asbestos has got to be a trade union based campaign. I mean, it's got to involve all the trade unions. It's a working class campaign. It's in the interest of our working class children in Hackney.
There's a substitute for every use of asbestos. What the hell are we doing with it still in our society and our environment? Still killing people.
That's asbestos. That's incredible. Asbestos. Got a little bit there, it's a juicy bit. Oh, this bit came out of the boiler room. Oh, I go licking the walls sometimes. I recommend, I think school inspectors ought to do this. Wonderful. Children must get at it. Asbestos.